We continue the Haggadah in what is considered the main body of the Haggadah, Aramean Mitzrayim. This is the text that's taken from the Vidui Bikurim, when one would bring the first fruit to the Bet HaMikdash and would tell the story of Yitzat Mitzrayim and thank God for giving us the land, etc. So, and we said yesterday that Vayered Mitzrayim Anus Al Pi Hadibur, we went to Egypt, we were forced, we were bound by the divine word, that this refers not to the quarrel between the children of Yaakov, but rather to the fact that God told Abraham, your children are going to be enslaved in Egypt, and it was necessary for us to understand the concept of slavery in order to also understand the concept of freedom. So they go on with the text from Devarim. Vayagur Sham, the words Vayagur Sham mean he lived in Egypt. Yaakov lived in Egypt. Lagur in biblical Hebrew means temporarily. So melamed shelo yarad leishtakea ela lagur sham. He didn't go to settle down, but only temporarily. There's no source for that. There's no proof from the text that this is the meaning. And it could be that this is a rebuke by the rabbis, because we always have to have in mind, when the rabbis wrote that, this is about 1,500 years after the original text is written. So they're not talking necessarily about commentary of what was, but rather they're talking to their people. So when they say he only went temporarily, but he stayed there, maybe they're rebuking the people of their time, because when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first temple, he exiled everybody to Bavel. And then the Jews were sitting there and saying, Al Na'arot Bavel, Sham Yashavnu, Gam Bachinu, Bezochenu Tzion. On the rivers of Babylon, we sat down and cried when we remembered Zion. Now, 70 years later, less than 70 years later, they had an opportunity to go back to Zion and build the temple. How many people went back? Of the hundreds of thousands of exiles, 40,000. And the rest decided to stay in Bavel. We are comfortable there. We are just going to stay in Bavel until the kids graduate from college, and then their grandchildren, and then they stay there for 300-400 years. So the rabbis had this kind of bone to pick with the diaspora. But in parentheses, I'll say that even though they were not happy with the fact that they were Jews in Babylonia, they couldn't criticize them too much because they depended on their money. Just like today, you have these relationships between Israel and the United States, or Jews in diaspora in general. They have this dilemma of, do I insist that everybody comes to Israel, right, and then I have to deal with the economic pressure, or do I let them be there, put Zionism aside for a little bit, and just ask them to give money and support Israel? So how was this displayed for the rabbis? They had a mahloket that went on for 7 generations, a dispute where they disagreed. It's the first dispute ever between the rabbis. It's recorded in Masechet Haggadah, and it says that there was a disagreement on whether when you bring a korban, when you bring a sacrifice to the temple, do you have to come personally with it and put your hands on it and say the vidui, or you could send it with the messenger. So systematically for 7 generations, one rabbi said yes, the one said no, as if they deliberately wanted to leave it as an open question. And that's an important lesson, because sometimes you cannot make a black and white either or decision. Why did they want to leave it open? Because they figured out this: if we say that you must come with your korban to Eretz Israel, some people will come, some people will stop coming. They can't travel with the korbanot. So we're going to cut off this financial channel, because with the korbanot they would send money, they would send donations, and they needed that to support the economy in Israel and the Bet HaMikdash, of course. On the other hand, if you tell them you don't have to come, just send the messenger, then we will never see them, and we want to see them personally, because out of 1,000 Jews that go to visit Israel, a couple of them decide to make aliyah, and even those who don't make aliyah get more connected to the land.
Was it left as an open question?
It was left as an open question. It was left as an open question, and and so they achieved this balance. On one hand, they say, do what you want. Like you could later on, Bet Hillel took over Bet Shammai, so it was sort of like sealed. But basically, they convey this message. It's important to understand this in the context of People in Israel, people outside Israel. Bimtei me'at, we continue with the pasuk. Bimtei me'at, kemo shene'emar, b'shivrim nefesh yeldu avotecha mitzrayim. We went to Egypt with a small group, 70 people. Vayisham legoy, melamed shavu Yisrael metzuyanim sham. And it became a great nation. The Midrash says, ayu metzuyanim sham. Now, in modern Hebrew, metzuyan means excellent. But in the Hebrew of the rabbis, metzuyan means outstanding. What?
They were there.
They're in Egypt, yeah. But Mitsuyan means from the word letzayen, to mark.
Yeah.
So he's marked out, outstanding. So not necessarily in a positive way. You could be outstanding or, an outlier in a negative way. So here again, this is something that the rabbis are talking to their generation, because there were people in the time of Hachamim that decided not to do, for example, Brit Milah. They were afraid to have the circumcision, because they were involved with Greek society, Greek and Roman society, that looked down at it. They didn't like circumcision because they thought it's you're hurting the body. They believed in the perfection of the human body, and they also engaged in all their athletic activities were done in fully naked, so people could see if you are ever Brit Milah or not. So there were a lot of parents who decided not to do Brit Milah. So when they say Metzuyanim, this is one of the things that the rabbis care about. This is the mark of the Jew. That's something that you cannot hide. Even though some people try to hide even that. People who were born circumcised would pull their skin in order to cover up for that. And then we know that for a fact that in Mered Bar Kochva, which happened in the 2nd century, there were people who went and recircumcised. So we have the full spectrum of what happens in people's mind from a religious point of view. A child is born. Some people decide not to circumcise their children. Some people do. When the children grow up, there are some among those who are circumcised that decide to pull their skin and to cover the milah, to cover the circumcision, so they won't be recognized as Jews, so they can blend into Greek society. And then, after a while, the nationalism grows and they want religious independence. They want to go to war against the Romans. And the Mishnah speaks about thousands of people who had a second circumcision after they tried to hide their milah. So, and the rabbis emphasized several times that Bnei Israel were redeemed from Egypt because of the milah that they performed there. Because it's v'kol areh lo yuchal bo. So they had to be to do this. Gadol atzum. The rest is a clear explanation. They bring a piece of a part of the pasuk in Devarim and highlight it with the text from Shemot, from the actual story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and so vayaret onyenu. So we read this, Vayaret onyenu v't'amalenu v't'lachatzenu. So the pasuk in Devarim says that Hashem saw our affliction and our suffering and our torture, and it says, Vayar Elohim b'nei Israel, vayeda Elohim, and Hashem saw b'nei Israel and He knew their suffering. So the Midrash says, Vayaret onyenu. זו פרישות דרך ארץ, כמה שנאמר, וריתנו על האובניים עם בנו ועמיתנו אותו, ותעמלנו אל הבנים, כמו שנאמר, כל הבן הילוד, היורה תשליחו. So, interesting twist of the Midrash. They say, what is the oni? What is the suffering that Bnei Israel went through in Egypt? It's the separation between men and women. That men and women stopped having marital relationships because Paro made this decree that all newborn children, all males, will be killed. So, according to the Midrash, men decided to separate from the women, so they have no more children. So that was a suffering that the Midrash comments on. I think in most families, when you read this in the Haggadah, no one understands what it is, and there's no need to explain it to the children, so you could skip that part. And here, they say, what is amal? Toil. This is already moving to their time. It's the children. To have children, to raise them, it's toil. It's not easy. So whoever wrote that was thinking of his own children at home, thinking what we call tzar gidul banim. It's for him because it's a burden. Finally, we read this: "Vayotzeinu Hashem miMitzrayim, lo al yedei malach, velo al yedei saraf, velo al yedei shaliach, ela HaKadosh Baruch Hu bichvodo v'atzmo." God took us out of Egypt, not through an angel, not through a fiery angel, not through a messenger, but God Himself. That is, there are different opinions why the Midrash insisted on that. Part of it is because we were talking about the whole idea of angels that are intermediary between us and God. Was not a favorable opinion from many rabbis. They wanted to emphasize you communicate directly with God. It's important to mention even today, because some people think that in order to communicate with God, you have to go to the grave of a tzaddik or to a living tzaddik. But if you want to do that, you could do that. And the idea of visiting a holy site where a tzaddik was buried, or even the kotel or Marat HaMachpelah, or even going to someone who's alive, is that it will inspire you. That you yourself, you feel more spiritually connected and you say a better tefillah. Or when you go to a righteous person, that person joins with you in tefillah. But if when you talk about a living person, if that person asks you for anything in return for his prayers, you're not allowed to go to him. Because by doing that, he appoints himself to be a representative of God and is commercializing that relationship. My great-grandfather was himself a great Kabbalist, said, if anyone says that, I'll bless you that you have a child, but I want to be a tzaddik in the Brit Milah, say thank you very much, I'm going to talk directly to God. I don't need you. This is
not Kabbalist,
the Mekabel, right. Torah Kabbalah, right. That I need to receive. So that's an important statement to make. Also, and with that we'll conclude. The idea is that Bnei Israel in Mitzrayim, in order to be redeemed, they had to understand that they have this direct and immediate relationship with God, and that leads us to the Pesach, because Korban Pesach by itself was their show of faith. When they take, we spoke about that, when they take the Korban, this lamb or goat that was worshipped by the Egyptians, and they tie it they bring it into the house and they slaughter it and they roast it, so everybody will know that they are eating this Korban. Not only that, they go and they splash the blood on the threshold and on the doorposts, so they mark themselves. They tell the Egyptians, we live here, come get me if you want. And that was an act of defiance, but also show of faith in God, who was the only one who took them out of Egypt. So with this, we finished like what is considered to be the main body of the Haggadah. But we'll continue. But just to keep you, with that thought, what happens if I don't read all of that? Remember, always that Rabban Gamliel says this famous statement: "Kol mi shelo amar shlosha dvarim elu b'Pesach lo yatsa yed lechovато ve'elu hen Pesach matzah u'maror." If you didn't say those three words on Pesach, you did not fulfill your obligation. What are the three words? Pesach, which is the Korban, matzah, maror, bitter herbs. Meaning that if you did say those three words, you fulfilled your obligation. So if you want to know what is the shortest Haggadah possible,
Pesach, matzah, u'maror.
Shortest Haggadah possible.
Three words.
Pesach, matzah, u'maror.
Have a big meal.
Yeah, and then sit and talk. Yes. Baruch Adonai, Le'olam, Amen, Amen. Rabbi Hanania, Chodesh Tov. Rabbi Hanania.